So in spirituality, one of the things that we are told that we have to deal with, to fix, is our ego, right? That the ego is basically, every good drama needs a bad guy. In spirituality, the ego plays that role, right? It's in opposition to our attainment, and therefore we need to do battle. Right? But it's so pervasive in our culture, just how it's arisen, how we've grown up with it, how everything supports it, how we've bought into it, that it basically infiltrates everything that we do, think about, until it doesn't. But I think the reason that it's so sticky is that if, in Buddhism they talk about suffering, existence is suffering. But it's not, it can be that, but part of the stickiness of ego consciousness is that sometimes it's really good, right? If it was just all suffering, we'd get tired of it much sooner. But it's sort of like slot machines, every once in a while they pay off big, and so that's the hook. If they never paid off, nobody would ever go. You'd get tired of just putting quarters in it. It wouldn't be any fun. Wouldn't be any attraction there at all. But the fact that every once in a while, maybe not you, but the person down there gets the big payoff, and so that's the attraction. So it's not like life never feels really good. I mean, egoic consciousness, if you get maybe an unexpected promotion, or, you find yourself in a new relationship that you really hoped to be in, and suddenly it's there. And life can feel really good, right? Or you get the house that you always wanted. I mean, life can feel really, really good. So it's good to recognize that sense of egoic consciousness there can be rewards to that perspective that are enticing, that keeps us going back. The problem is that those sort of peak moments don't last, right? That's the other part of Buddhism, the impermanence part, right? Right. So if they lasted, it'd be great. If that new car would make you happy, if it was the car that actually made you happy, as long as you had that car, you should be happy, right? But it fades after a while. The promotion, as long as you have that job, you should be happy. Right? But there's the diminishing returns. It feels really good the first day. Second day, it still feels really good. People are still patting you on the back. And over time, it's like, yeah, that's nice. It's nice. What's next? I want the next thing. So there's that movement. And it's, if it was the object that had the ability to make us happy, then the accumulation of that object and another would be sufficient. And we can look around, we can see that's not true in any kind of permanent way. It's true maybe temporarily, but then it begins to fade. But I think what is really happening is that it's not so much the object, but it's the elimination of a wanting for a short period of time. Just that where we don't want anything different than what's already happening. The first day or week or month on a job, we're not already dreaming of the next promotion. We're sort of still delighted with what's happened. But then the wanting comes back in because there's a sense of, yeah, that's really nice, feels good, but there's something that still hasn't quenched my thirst in any kind of complete way. So it's like, well, what's next? What's the next thing? Bigger house, better car, new relationship, more respect, more, and you can see this is what drives pretty much everything, right? The whole economic and social structure. Right? Trying to satisfy some need that we've been taught is going to result from some kind of external event or object that will be, you work hard, study hard, get a good job, get married, have the right kids, and you'll be happy. And like I say, if it were totally false, always resulted in suffering, we wouldn't get hooked by it. But the fact that it is sometimes feels good, sometimes feels really, really good, that it keeps us engaged in that process. So we conclude that what I need to do is just manage things better, right? If I manage things better, I could, control my work situation, I could control my relationship, I could control my, mental state. If I really work at it, then things will work out. Right? And again, that is true to a certain extent, right? There are payoffs for going along with the program. There are social payoffs, there are economic payoffs, there's payoffs in terms of respect, community appreciation, awards, people thinking well of you, people liking you. And there's a lot of payoffs there. So that there's a certain attraction to keep going down that road, all of which is fine, right? All of which is fine. It's not actually a problem. The difficulty is only when we begin to believe that by just going down the road a little further, one more attainment, then, finally. Now I can finally relax. I've finally been fulfilled at the deepest part of myself, and I can just relax. That's the carrot, right? It keeps us sort of pulling along. The same process is at work in spirituality. Because we can have, peak moments, and then we think, I know that if I try a little harder and have more peak moments or better peak moments, maybe then one day I can finally relax. I'll finally have the experience that'll satisfy everything. And I can finally sit back on the couch and relax and feel fulfilled. Again, the carrot. Right? It's the promise that's never kept. It's seems like in our culture, it's what most people believe. I mean, they may seek different ways of attaining it. It doesn't have to be all success-driven, or, it could be, I don't know, bass fishing, or, anything really. I mean, all of which, again, is fine. There's no problem with enjoying life, exploring life, experiencing life fully. None of that's a problem, unless we believe that somehow if we just have more of it, or a better experience, or bigger or longer, that somehow it will be ultimately satisfying. But the truth is, I mean, there's only actually one thing that's ultimately satisfying. And that's the recognition of what we already are at our deepest nature. That satisfies. Because the recognition is there that what I am seeking, I have always been. I couldn't be anything other than that. There's no way to be other than that. It's not an attainment. So this spiritual journey is actually simple. Simple is better. It's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying it's simple. One of the difficulties is that it's simple. If it was complicated, mind's all for that. Great, I've got 3 decades worth of progress here in front of me. I'm good for it. I know I'll go the distance. But just sitting with allowing things to be as they are, as simple as that sounds, mind doesn't like that. Mind's uncomfortable with that. It's like, yeah, but, that may be good in the future when I get these other things solved, but I've got to deal with these things first, and I can always go back to that because, well, it's always there, so it'll be there in the future, and, I've got to deal with these other things first. But we can just take note of that. Here's the mind that's been trained, conditioned from a very early age to believe that what will satisfy is some experience, some event, some possession. Always something outside, somewhat beyond our ability to grasp. It needs effort. It needs us to manage the situation, work hard, attain. So what we're talking about here is a recognition of the gift that is already given. Where's the excitement in that? Huh? So it's real easy for the mind to come in and look at that and say, well, that doesn't sound that interesting. If that were actually true, then it would be true for everybody. How special could that be? Right? You get the sense of the ego's involvement here. I want to attain something that's special. I want to realize oneness, but I want other people to realize that I realized oneness. The mind is very tricky this way.
And if it's easy, it can't be.
I'm sorry?
If it's easy, if it's simple, it can't be.
Yeah, how profound could it be if it's simple, right? But the underlying assumption is that somehow this, whatever this this body mind is this skin tight thing that I am, somehow is separate from everything else. And we can see just on a purely ecological, physiological level that that's not true. But to really see that that's not true and the implications of that are profound. I mean, the statement is simple enough, but the implications are, the implications change everything. Because what we see both in ourselves and more easily in other people is, the sort of mental afflictions, little disturbances, little little greed, hate, intolerance. I mean, not an excessive amount, just sort of your normal, everyday, socially accepted amount. That kind of amount. So we can look around and see that, but we can see that the effect of that not only in ourselves, how that affects our own inner world when we, get contracted into one of those states. We can see what that does to, just how we view life, how we view the other person, how we view ourselves. I mean, just the impact of that. And then on a broader scale, you can see how that plays out not only with individual other persons, but just with, society at a larger sense, in a family, in a corporation, in a country. It's the same movement, just being played out. Somehow I'm separate from all of those other folks over there, and I've got to take care of me, mine. It doesn't matter, if it causes suffering over there. But that's the outcome of this sense of separation, this sense of what I am is separate. Belief, right? And then from that belief that I'm separate, I've got to, look out for things that'll make me happy, try to avoid things that'll make me suffer, and try to get through life with as few bumps and bruises as I can before I die. I mean, that's basically the strategy. But everybody else is doing that too. And we can see the net effect of that in all kinds of ways, environmentally, politically, socially, racially, all kinds of ways. But then we can sense into when it's like, oh, I've got to look out for myself, I have to protect myself. There's an inquiry there about what exactly am I protecting? Are we talking about physical protection? I don't want to walk down a dark alley. Okay, makes sense. Or are we talking about psychological protection? Right? I don't want somebody to think badly of me. I want to, all those psychological needs that, and we can just see, again, it's not that they're wrong, it's things that we were trained to do without knowing that we were. We were being conditioned without knowing that we were. Our parents didn't know they were doing it. They didn't know they were conditioned to such an extent. There's no blame here. There's no, but it's just, it sort of seems like a natural, in this life evolutionary process that where we take on this ego consciousness and also have an opportunity, if we're at all vigilant, to see, yes, there's some usefulness there. I do have to function in the world. I do have to, make a living or, provide some service or do something in the world to get by. And yet, it's not how, there's something more than that. So it seems like it's an evolutionary process where we go through it, we take on this role. I mean, you can watch kids in high school doing it, right? Looking desperately for an identity, hoping that they hit on one that's all their friends believe. And then most people hang on to that one for the duration. So, but at some point we might think, well, yeah, that's, I'm just getting tired of the act, basically. I'm getting tired of propping up this false self. So I wonder what's there if I wasn't quite so hyper vigilant about protecting something that I know deep down isn't really real myself, which is why it takes so much energy to prop up, right? If it were real, it wouldn't take any energy at all, right? But the fact that it's not really who we are, it's who we've taken ourselves to be, right? So there's a real easy test to figure out what's egoic consciousness, that's made up of. So we can all do it in 5 seconds here. Okay. So anything that you didn't think about in those 5 seconds isn't who you are. So if you didn't recall your name, for example, if you didn't recall your profession, you didn't recall what you believed in, what hurt you suffered back in high school, what hopes you have, what fears you had, right? If it was who you are and it was absent for 5 seconds, it's not who you are, right? You have to, all of these things we think into existence over and over again. So it feels like there's a continuity there, but it's actually us remembering ourselves, who we are, over and over and over again. Thinking ourselves back into, oh, that's who I am. I'm this body, I'm this story, this situation, this name, this address, all of that. We keep reminding ourselves. Every time we wake up in the morning, we forget it for a few hours. We wake up in the morning, put it all back together, and we do it over and over and over again, and it feels like there's continuity there. But it requires us to remember it, right? It requires us to pull it up from memory back into active consciousness, and then believing, oh yeah, that's who I am. I'm good with that belief, that concept, that dogma. That's who I am. So the mind will do that. This isn't about shutting the mind down. The mind's good at doing a lot of things. Finding the unity of all things isn't one of them. It's good at slicing and dicing and, making comparisons and separations and differentiations. It's good at that. That's useful. It's good at logical thinking, concepts. But what we're talking about isn't subject to concepts. It's not, this awareness that we're talking about isn't a concept. Right? It's one of the risks of talking about it is that it's easy to make it sound like a concept, or easy to convince ourselves that it's sort of a philosophy. It's not. It's something that we can not only sense into directly, but actually recognize. Well, what recognizes itself is consciousness, recognizing itself. That's the whole ball game, actually. You know, we as separate individuals can look at consciousness, can think we're visiting consciousness, but when we really look deeply, it's consciousness playing all the roles. So in talking about egoic consciousness and that it is made up of our thoughts and concepts about who we are, isn't the solution there isn't to make it go away, isn't to become antagonistic to it. Right? Because the only thing that could become antagonistic to egoic consciousness, ego, right? I'm going to improve myself. I'm going to get rid of that egoic consciousness once and for all. And then I'll be enlightened, and then I'll be happy, and then everything will go my way. So we can just see, okay, that's that movement again. It's the movement of wanting things to be the way I want them to be, wanting more pleasure, less pain, which is a natural thing for this body to want. Of course it wants more pleasure. Of course it wants less pain, right? It's why we have words like pleasure and pain, so. Of course. So there's not a problem with that. But we can also see where that's useful and where it's not useful. It's useful in terms of, yes, I want to put some food in my mouth that's good for this body. Yeah, that gives the body pleasure, sure. If I put this poison in my body, it's going to give it pain. That's not good. All right, that's fine. But that's a different thing than a sense of, am I willing to be with this difficult situation? Am I willing to be engaged in solving this problem that I've been presented with? Am I willing to be vulnerable to my partner? Am I, that level of participation where we're not coming from pleasure and pain, where we're not coming from what's in it for me, where we're coming into it from what does this situation require? Is there something that I can offer the situation? Maybe my silence, maybe my action, who knows? Every situation's going to be a little different. But there comes a point where there's a movement that's not out of egoic consciousness. And that becomes possible when we come into recognition more and more that what's actually present here, what's actually living this life, is that awareness. It's aware of this body, these thoughts, this movement. Doesn't have a problem with any of it. But it's present for it. It's present for the busy mind. It's present for the physical discomforts. It's present for the boredom. It's present for the good times. It actually doesn't have, it's equally present for all of that. It doesn't, it's not operating from preferences. The mind is. So the idea of trying to get beyond ego by trying to, not enjoying the pleasures, or, trying to be, ultra stoic in face of pain, that's not actually going to get you there. It's really seeing that what we are is already okay with both of those. Sure, the body prefers this and not that, of course. But when there is no choice, when something difficult is happening, consciousness is actually okay with that too. So one of the questions here is that how do we sense into this more subtle level of knowing and acting and responding to certain situations? And there are things that we know intuitively. Things like when we have a sense of joy, and we have a sense of amazement at just whatever it is that's happening. It could be something little, child laughing, bird. Doesn't have to be mind-blowing, but just a sense of amazement, like how life is appearing now. And I'm in the extraordinary position of being here to notice it, to appreciate it, to be in awe of it, to enjoy it, to be inspired by it, right? So that's the opportunity, is to recognize what this gift is that we've actually been given. And we can do that more easily when we're not totally caught up in what's in it for me. It's a way to pull ourselves out of our self-interest. Gratitude, awe, amazement, joy, love, all of those things involve really forgetting about ourselves. It's all a movement from a deeper place, connecting us to something out beyond ourselves, where we've lost the idea of I am having a joyful experience, right? There's just the joy, there's just the wonder, you sort of pulled into that experience. So we've lost that personal perspective, like, okay, it's me, this is making me happy because I am having a joyful experience. It's like someone at a party, everybody's having a good time, and someone says, oh, aren't we all having a good time, right? Everybody becomes self-conscious and thinks, oh, well, am I really having a good time? Just kills it right there. But as long as, the movement was outward and, you were had forgotten about yourself and then just enjoying the flow, everything was good. But as soon as, we try to conceptualize it and think, well, am I happy? I'm not sure. Maybe, and then the moment is lost. So, those are opportunities to just take the time and the space to allow those moments to emerge, you could say. Right? If we're in too big a rush, we miss it. So it's like taking a little time or going for a walk or, sitting by the window or sit in a chair and nothing, Doesn't have to be extraordinary, but just allow ourselves the time and the space to open to however life presents itself. And just to be willing to, not to try to feel joy, not to try to feel gratitude because it's a good spiritual practice. Not that. Okay? It's just like to just actually open up to whatever it is that's presenting itself. It can just be, a plant, tree, the cloud, doesn't matter. Just so that's any of those things. It's just allowing. It's not a practice. It's not like we're going to try to do it right because it'll be good for me. It'll get me somewhere. Not that. Just it's an opportunity. We're live. Life is happening. Just to really enjoy that. Another, when life starts to move through us, there's, it doesn't, when it sort of nudges us in a certain direction, it's not saying, it won't say, do this because X, Y, Z will happen and you'll be really happy and, life will be good. It doesn't have to explain itself, right? It's just sort of like, you might just go there. Simple. You don't know why. You don't know what the payoff is. You don't know if it's going to be a payoff. You don't know if it's going to be easy. You don't know if it's going to be difficult. It's just life giving a suggestion. You might try there. Easy to ignore because it doesn't argue. Doesn't say, no, you really should go there. It won't do that. That's the mind saying that, right? The mind will say, okay, here's all the pluses, here's all the minuses, add them up, think about it. That's all mind-based. Okay. When life is genuinely moving, it's more like there's just sort of a little inclination to go this way or that way. You usually don't know why. You don't know whether it's a little thing, you don't know whether it's a big thing. You don't know if it's an opportunity, you don't know if it's just avoiding a problem. You don't know, but you sort of sense into it like, yeah, I'm not going to ignore that. You can. You can. Doesn't insist. Doesn't have to, right? It's life after all. So we can say, no, I want to do this. It's okay. But there's a flow when we learn. It's just that little sort of breeze, to go this way or that way. When we get used to sensing, being being settled enough that we can sense those sort of just little movements. It's not like somebody talking in your ear or anything. It's just like, there's just an intuition, you could say, to do this or to do that. So, and then you begin to trust that more and more, and then you become more sensitive to it. Then life tends to have a flow to it. You're just sort of moving with that, and much, much, much less from a sort of strategic standpoint, like, okay, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to look at what's, my 5-year plan is and what's best for me. And after a while, you begin to trust that movement has intelligence. Intelligence beyond whatever I can drum up here. There's something else happening, and if I can be on board with that, trust that, move with that, life is easier. Doesn't mean that difficult things don't happen, but it just doesn't feel so personal. There's a flow to it, there's an ease to it, there's magic to it, actually. Things happen that you wouldn't have guessed were possible.